I've been scarred and I've been bruised. I have learned just what to do. I need to leave my past behind me. I need to look to the future. No matter what will come, no matter what I've done, I know just what to do. And that's all because of you.
Hi everyone, welcome back to my YouTube channel. Welcome back to another Tuesday. Thank you so much for still being here. If you've been here for a while, thank you for finally being here. If you recently joined us, and for the people that are contemplating their stay, hello to you, and I hope you enjoy today's segment. My name is Yana Mavumengwana, and this is your favorite personal development and mental health channel. We're bringing you one of those. Tingle's just here for vibes today. Don't worry about it. We're not crying. Tingle's just here for vibes. We're bringing you another very important segment today. So I hope we've got big siblings or older siblings in the room. I hope we've got mommies in the room. I hope we've got educators in the room, etc., etc. But most of us, if not all of us, are in a position to influence one or more teenagers. So even if you're not directly involved in a teen's life, just passively by having this knowledge, you may be of value to the teenagers that are observing you, and therefore I thought it's worthwhile to do for my audience as well, and that is discussing the dynamics surrounding teenage pregnancy or maybe teenage sexual involvement. And of course, this is personally significant to me because if you do the maths between my age and the age of my daughter, it is telling that I was a teen when I had my child, and I know given a magic key, I would probably do things a little differently if I could. So I suppose the most important thing that one needs to consider when dealing with teenagers is the inherent vulnerability of teenagers. And of course, this is tricky because they're not really children, but at the same time, they're not really adults. It's a very fragile time, a time of negotiating a very important developmental conflict inside of them. And they need adults to successfully resolve that internal conflict. And that's the biggest conflict of development, which is, who am I? It's mostly important at this time because prior to adolescence, the dependence on your system or the dependence on your parents is almost needed for life itself. The caregiving required from our caregivers is such a life necessity that independence from them is unwelcome, uncomfortable, and life-threatening. So there's no debate between you and the authority that is happening in the house or the authority figures that surround you. If they say X happens like this, it happens like this. If they say Y happens like this, it happens like this. You don't almost rebel that instruction because it is usually for your benefit. But as you sort of grow to preteen and then you get to early adolescence, suddenly there's just tasks that you're starting to realize you can do on your own, and the parents never even find out about it. So there's this incoming data that you're a separate person from your parents, a separate entity altogether that can make decisions. The parents may never find out about the decisions, and these decisions are for you. And the parents start to sort of deviate from you. They can go to town and leave you behind. They can delegate what seems to be an adult responsibility to you, maybe cooking, taking care of the household while they're running errands, whatever. But there's usually an ongoing exchange from the environment that's starting to be trusting of responsibility to you. And of course, we internalize that by thinking, I am responsible for my own life. I can handle adult matters. It's still gray because they also don't have much foresight about the future and the extremities of adult living. They don't know, but with the little adult tasks that have been delegated to them, they think I can do this on my own. And of course, this happens with sex as well. And it's a very dangerous game to play because unlike most childhood mistakes, the consequences that tend to accompany sexual behavior are of permanent nature. It's the most unfair thing about sexual intercourse. You know, if you drink and debut that space while you are figuring out your sense of self, when you stop drinking, your life sort of goes back to its pre-drinking stage if you're lucky. You know, when you eventually learn and do better, typically the direction of your life follows the better choice of decision making, except for decisions made around sex. There is nothing about negative sex consequences that is temporary. Regret is not going to fix any of it for you. Feeling bad, learning, being better isn't going to resolve the consequence itself. It's usually sexual transmitted infections, it's usually pregnancy. None of those things you can make a comeback from, not 100% comeback. Anyway, therefore teenagers deserve protection from this, because we know better, they don't know better, they think that they do, but eventually, when they eventually catch up to the reality, they can't go modify that decision. It comes with options that are just off the table. You're never going to have a biological nuclear family that doesn't involve, you know, some level of step parenting. You're vulnerable to that family setup now, if not single parenting altogether. And because socioeconomically teenagers aren't really contributing to the labor market because they're at school, chances are the family system as it exists, without prepping for this baby and therefore prepping for an income injection, has to take care of an extra mouth to feed, which stretches the rent to a wider pool of people, literally rendering that family much more vulnerable than what it was before. So it makes everyone, even the people with no babies, sort of, I don't want to say poorer, but technically yes, that's what I mean. We can afford less for each fragment of the family unit because we need to borrow the resources to cater, you know, for this separate individual that has joined our family system. Secondly, working or dreams and ambition is guided by necessity thereafter. So making yourself accessible to opportunities, maybe postgrad, maybe international experience, and whatever, tends to be a leisure and a luxury when you've just given birth. So you're likely to take, I suppose, the most secure jobs, not necessarily the ones that you like, the most short-term qualifications in varsity where you can quickly finish because you've just got a responsibility, you know, that is imminent. So uyubangu, low-hanging fruit almost. So it makes one incredibly vulnerable to poverty in the future, even condemned to a particular life that even if you wish to change your mind, it's incredibly difficult to. Another thing is just because you're still negotiating your sense of self, it's so difficult to be a teen mom because just developmentally, you're not at this place, you know, that is ready to actually care for a little one. I remember when I had just given birth, I was a first year 17-year-old, and just the things that mattered to me in my development right now were just not congruent to baby needs. I think my biggest concern with how my body is going to change. I mean, you transact with the stuff that you know is a bargaining tool in social spaces. So you know how you are looking is a transacting tool, you know, between you and the opposite sex, you know, and your friends and whatever. So I really liked how I looked. I liked my boobs. I liked my belly. I liked the fact that I didn't have stretch marks. So these things were of primary concern to me. The baby was of concern, but the primary concern was making sure I don't have this and I don't have that. And I remember this self-consciousness that I felt, you know, so you start treating the baby as the cause of these negative changes that are now happening because they are undesirable. You also don't have the maturity to reflect positively on it. You know, when we're much older, we thank our bodies for carrying this little one. The way belonging and peer approval is so important. You're not reflecting wholesomely to this thing. You just want your body back. You know, you want to look how you looked, etc., etc. I mean, the thought of breastfeeding was one of the most terrifying things that have ever had to cross my mind. Like, I just had a picture of my boobs totally sagging, and I just could not handle it, you know. And primarily a mature mommy, a well-meaning mommy, knows that's primary standard for your baby. It's the ideal. But because technically I'm a baby myself, I wanted the ideal standard for me, and that standard was to retain much of my physical image as I possibly could. It's embarrassing, it's isolating, because what a mommy needs to do and what a teenager needs to do are very different. You want to hang out with your friends, you want to understand what's happening in the social spaces. So friends start doing things without you because you know you're babysitting, you need to go to clinics, the other mom is queuing at your age, you feel rejected, you feel judged, you feel ashamed of what you've done, and it starts impacting heavily on your self-concept and how you negotiate life thereafter. It's very, very difficult. And this is coming from a privileged stance because I'm from a massively big family, you know, and I'm from a family that could sort of shoulder to some degree the responsibility that I had now brought and allowing me the fortune to do my studies and postgrad, etc., etc. So there was a lot of scaffolding that should I drop the ball, there's plenty set of hands ready to catch the ball. They're competent, able, and resourced, and under them there's even another layer from cousins, extended family, or Darcy, etc., etc., etc. you know. I'm from a married couple, so it's not just my family, it's also my mom's family. As a result, my aunt took over the caring of my daughter at some stage, and fortunately my daughter's dad was also one of 9 siblings, so you can guess how much of a big family he was also from. So from that side of parenting, there was also his hands, and when he dropped the ball, there was a large pool. That is not everybody's life. In fact, that is a very, very rare occurrence altogether. I was lucky to be able to stretch my studying all the way to 6 years, you know, just staying at school, chasing my goals while my baby is being looked after. And therefore, when I eventually could graduate, I was, I suppose, part of the population that is considered resourced and educated and could afford then taking over. That's not everybody's reality. In fact, it's not most people's reality. I suppose another big thing to consider here is the naivety of teenagers, you know, when it comes to negotiating safe sex practices that protect them against HIV. You know, most teenagers are debuting sex around that age. You know, they're having sex for the first time, and because they know HIV mostly comes from sex, and I haven't had sex, this is my first time, the assumption is that if it's my partner's first time as well, there's no way they could have, you know, gotten HIV, so we HIV negative. This is teenage maths. I'm HIV negative because I've never slept with anyone. You saying to me you've never slept with anyone, therefore. So it becomes easier to drop the necessity of condoms, because also sex is judged. Going to fetch condoms from the clinic or purchasing them is also a bit frowned upon, so it's easier to let it slide. You know, trusting that I'm safe, there's no danger, I'll take a morning after pill to avoid the pregnancy. They completely do not include the possibility of HIV transmission in other methods, etc., etc. And teenagers are very hesitant to disclose because of the attack on their social credibility that can come with the stigma. You know, the relationships they have usually don't have the maturity to absorb that level of disclosure and support one another. So people know disclosure is too risky in your teenage circles, so they don't, even the ones that have been disclosed to, let alone how threatening it can be to disclose to your sexual partner. So even in that stance, if that person doesn't insist on a condom, usually the condom is not going to be included in the sexual activity. So it just becomes a mess. It literally becomes a mess. They don't have the capacity to negotiate safe sex practices for themselves. And I suppose another big thing is that because you can't teach your kids how to have sex, you know, you talk about sex, you talk the dangers of sex, but the actual activity is something that they feel like, I still don't know what to do when I get there. So pornography becomes their teacher for the technicalities involved in the physical act itself. Now, porn is for entertainment. Porn is for pleasure. Porn is for stimulation. It's not for sex education. So they're not going to include the awkward parts of having a dialogue before you enter sex. So they're okay, that looks easy. Cool. Their friends talk about it. It's nice in the social spaces. They feel confident enough to go try it. But porn doesn't say, disclaimer, there was a dialogue before we got to this part. You know, that does not happen in pornography. So this is why we need close proximity to our teenagers, so we can have this conversation with them, but also so we can make alternatives accessible to them. By alternatives, I mean one important thing when developing a sense of self is interaction with others. You know, this is why teenagers are rapidly trying many cells around the same time. Because, okay, you figure that I'm different from my own person, but it's not like you've got knowledge of what is that person exactly. So you copy that one, you copy the one from TV, you copy your favorite influencer, you copy whoever's inspiring. You go to church, so amiable to influence. They preach right, you want to be that kind of thing. You go to camp, ubambeleyani vibe. You go to Etralian, ubambeleyani vibe. While you are gathering this data, trying it out, going to that extreme, and finally, at the end of 15 years, solidifying what it is that is in alignment with you. So alternatives matter a lot in terms of catering to a sense of belonging, catering to a sense of coolery. You know, as a result, the teenagers that have this input of compliments and stroking and being trusted with responsibility and belonging to some social group that is incentivized in terms of social credibility are less almost vulnerable, because ikhona lento kuncokolwa ngayo mosisex ufinish pressure eventually because uyashiywa izindaba, because awuyazi sex awuphoswa yiyo ncam, because awuyazi uphoswa yintoni lento ikuphosa izindaba ushiyeka apha kule nto iyi-trend, ushiyeka kule nto ikwenza ungabelongi nabanye, and belonging is important. So you'll see the kids that are belonging to a social club, that are belonging to the prefect body, that are belonging to the church, can fight harder against this pressure, because they get that cohesiveness, that sithetha ngento eyi-one and imkindi ndishiyekile. I remember when I felt like, okay, I'm definitely ready to break my virginity. Guys, there was nothing else informing the readiness except that I was starting to be, I suppose, the only person in the social group that didn't have the experience. And there's coolery in this inside info that, they debate. This one argues, no, it was not like that. No, it's not like this. And we kind of don't have something important to add. Being included, mattering, making impact, significant contribution to conversation matters. But the content is around boys, is around alcohol, is around this, is around this. Teenagers are trying these things out for the first time. So the likelihood that they're going to take it to the extreme is very high. To all of my teenagers, the most beautiful thing about sex is that the satisfaction doesn't drop with a late debut. The head start gives you absolutely nothing. It's not one of those things that when you're more sexually experienced, you cash in better from the experience. It's just one of those things where FOMO has no consequence. The head start gives you absolutely no value. My personal opinion, I know people don't want to be policed and judge their bodies. My personal opinion, as a practitioner, as a big sister, as a teen mom, defer sexual intercourse to as late as you possibly can. It has little to no consequence that is unchangeable in the future to you. The other parts of your life, though, they do. If you miss the boat on some parts, and should you get it wrong, you're not going to change the consequence. It doesn't matter how bad you feel. It doesn't matter how much you've learned now. It condemns you to some permanent way of living that had you known better. The people that know better, that have walked it, and ignore nearly, I promise you, your kid is still going to be beautiful when you eventually have your kid. Relationships chosen very young typically do not last. Yours is not unique. I know now in love you think people just be hating. No, baby daddy, one, we're going to make it to the altar. Maybe you will. But you will make it to the altar already so compromised with a lot of challenges that your young marital life really shouldn't have to sustain. But stats say the likelihood is that chances are very small, smaller than what your mind is imagining. There's so much more fantastic things that you can try out. And the sex, when you eventually have it, is just going to be as lovely. So I hope that added some value to understanding what is it that makes teenagers vulnerable to this kind of practice, so you can look at it differently and maybe know that even if there is a pushback from them, they need you more so than ever. They need you to set the parameters for the limits when they're taking it too far. They're definitely going to try. This is how they eventually find their fit, by trying. So a sense of exploration is necessary. You cannot stand ahead of it. You can't force them not to explore. This is the only way they can successfully negotiate that developmental stage, by trying different things for a size, a sport, an extramural, a society, a friend, a relationship, and eventually by trying these things on, they eventually find what is more congruent with who they are. Sex will definitely make it there. You need to be there, setting the goalposts that you're not going to try that as well. It doesn't matter how much they temporarily think they hate you. They need the parameters. This ongoing search is happening in a world of abundance. According to Koyo, to be tried. It is the role of the caregivers and the adults to say, also so we explore up. Purpose yard. But kind of thing. This is what boundaries and parenting actually does to teenagers. They need it, they need it, they need us, they need us. And guys, yes, I know sex is amazing, sex is satisfying, and that truth does not change when you have started it late. However, having a baby too young is compromising, and being infected with HIV too early is also incredibly compromising. And I wish you a different life to that. So yes, there is advice. Psychologists typically don't advise, but I'm not sitting in my shrink tray now, so I can risk advising. Don't do it. Don't do it. There's many more that can give you a sense of enjoyment and fun and adventure in your life. Try those things, and eventually when you feel like you're ready for sex, have the discussion with an adult and see if you will actually reach the same conclusion. But in your teen years, I would personally advise you not to. But anyway, now that you have that info, I will leave the decision up to you. But yes, teen mommies, yeah, kuyaphileka guys. Xa sekwenzekile uba umide, kuyaphileka. but it's not something I would advise. I kid you not. I'm enjoying being a mom, but I'm also very aware that it's not like I had the option to not have kids if I wanted to. It's not like I can be like in my marriage, I just when I have one child. The likelihood is I say kono koyo. So if we're also gonna try for our child, our own biological child with my partner, you understand? If I wanted, to quit my job and do studies full time, yay, my kids' fees go like let up how 10,000. It needs la man. So there's just options and possibilities I cannot explore. Fortunately, most of them I wasn't even keen on exploring, but I'm very aware that in any case the options are not on the table. So yes, that is me, big sistering on the couch today. Do not have sex too early. The head start gives you absolutely nothing. Okay guys, bye. See you next Tuesday.